All right, since this course is going to be focusing mostly on Project Excalibur, let's talk about, let's take a deeper look at what Excalibur is trying to do. Excalibur is trying to unify what was previously different, separate, isolated products into a single backend framework of all of these products in order to make them much more integrated, lower or make fewer management consoles in order to management all these environments, but also create that tighter integration. So we start off with XenApp. We talked significantly about the unification of XenApp and XenDesktop. We talked, or we should be talking about EdgeSite, which is the monitoring component. So we're going to add real-time monitoring into this infrastructure, but we're going to do it by eliminating the need to have a separate product that gets installed, a separate management console. We're going to unify profile management, again, simplify that. And then we are also going to make storefront significantly easier and also significantly more integrated. So these are essentially the 5 components that are going to come together to create Excalibur. So let's take a deeper look at Excalibur from an architecture standpoint. You'll find that we've simplified the consoles. We now have at the very top here, as you can see, 2 consoles. We have Studio, which is geared towards administrators, and we'll talk about that more a little bit later. And we have Director, that's geared towards help desk. Now in the middle, you'll have your delivery layer, essentially, which is going to allow you to deliver resources from essentially a lot of different operating systems. So that is the Excalibur infrastructure up here. This delivery layer can be a controller with the SQL Server backend, but they can be different versions. You're no longer tied to a specific version. The importance is, and like we talked in the earlier module, is now we are separating the infrastructure components from the controller components. So the controller now has a specific role, which is to essentially connect users to resources. But not every one of those servers is going to be a XenApp server anymore. The controllers are going to be completely separate. And down here, these are all of the resources that you can connect into that infrastructure, that you can give users access to. So you have your Windows XP, your Windows 7, all the way to Windows Server 2012, R2, Windows 8. All of those can have a VDA agent that's installed on them, and the controller will connect users to those resources. So all you have to do now for a XenApp server, or what was previously a XenApp server, install the right VDA, and you can have a Windows 2003, and you can also have a Windows Server 2012 in the same farm, per se, in the same infrastructure, delivering resources. You no longer need to have a separate farm that's running, XenApp 6 and XenApp 6.5 or XenDesktop. We've removed that complexity by separating the components. Not every XenApp server is a controller anymore. The controller is a separate piece. In order to enable functions, you're installing the VDA software on it, and we'll talk about that later. And here, you're providing essentially the different use cases, the different scenarios for connecting these resources. And all of those are coming through what's known as subscribers, well, another word for, users, and excuse my horrible handwriting here, but this is users essentially that are connecting through whatever scenario they want, right? If someone is trying to get access to, for instance, a hosted shared desktop, hosted shared desktop, what would that be accessed through? Anyone? Anyone? If anyone said XenApp, then you are correct. So XenApp would give you access to that. Well, what about shared apps? Well, that's XenApp as well. Well, let's try something else. Maybe we want to get access to a personal desktop. What would that come through? Well, that would come through XenDesktop. Well, we should no longer talk about XenApp and XenDesktop. It's all XenDesktop. It's all one infrastructure, one product. It's a different use case at this point. And speaking of use cases, let's take a closer look. So the way to enable those use cases is through the FlexCast model. That's what FlexCast was built for. That's why the FlexCast management architecture is there. In that earlier slide, that was essentially the FlexCast management architecture with all of its glory and all of its different components. But when we break it down, well, what is FlexCast? Let's take a look. Who can tell me what is physical? What do I mean by FlexCast for physical? What does that mean? What product does that refer to? What technology does that refer to? Well, that's the remote PC access that you have access to from XenDesktop. So you can take your existing VDA, the virtual delivery agent, install it on a physical desktop in your office, and then through XenDesktop and through Storefront, give a user access to that physical desktop. We can do that. VDI. Well, VDI can come in several different flavors, right? I can have a VDI in terms of a desktop, but I can also publish an application from essentially a VDI instance, a virtual machine instance. So if I have an application that doesn't work well on a server operating system, like Windows Server 2003 or 2012 or 2008, and it requires a desktop operating system, and I want to remove this application from the desktop and virtualize it, well, one of the ways is to install that on a virtual machine running Windows XP or Windows 7, and then instead of publishing the desktop of that operating system, which is the case with VDI, you publish only the application. That application is being serviced from a desktop operating system. The caveat there is that it's a one-to-one connection. So if you want 10 users to get access to that app, then you would have to provision 10 desktops that are running that app, but instead of showing them the desktop on that VM, you're showing them the application. So the same concept as VDI, which is one-to-one, except you're showing an app instead of a desktop, and it's for specific use cases. Now, on the flip side, you have the hosted shared stuff. Now, on hosted shared, you also have access to desktops and apps. That's where you have a single server where multiple users can simultaneously get access to either a dedicated desktop or a single application. The difference there, VDI, it's a one-to-one connection between that VM and the user. On a hosted share, those users are all connected to the same server, the same VM, but they are being separated at the software layer. And then finally, you have local. Now with local, that's what? That's XenClient, right? So you have that hypervisor that gets installed on a desktop, physical desktop or physical laptop, and then you can put or deliver a virtual machine and manage that virtual machine centrally, but the execution is happening locally. So let's take a look at the products today before Excalibur. So if we take a look, you have the physical and VDI that are being serviced by XenDesktop, different management consoles there. You have the hosted share that is being serviced by what? XenApp. Again, you have different consoles there, and you have provisioning services in the mix, etc. You have local that's also being provisioned or being serviced by XenClient, different consoles, etc. What's the idea? What is Excalibur trying to do? Well, Excalibur is trying to simplify things. It's going to take XenApp and XenDesktop and combine them. So now you have all those three use cases, or the many use cases that are incorporated in those three boxes that I have here, the physical, the VDI in its two flavors, and the hosted shared in its two flavors. Now I can assure you that at some point, XenClient is also going to come under the umbrella of Excalibur so that that's also unified. But prior to Excalibur, I have a pop quiz for you. And this pop quiz might or might not show up on the exam anywhere, but it's good Citrix knowledge. Prior to Excalibur, before Excalibur, how many Citrix consoles do you think existed to manage this FlexCast model? Now remember, the FlexCast model is being unified under XenDesktop 7. Prior to XenDesktop 7, how many consoles do you think were out there? What? Did someone just say too many? Well, you're absolutely correct. But if I was to put a number against how many consoles were out there, the number would be 22. There were 22 consoles to manage all of this environment. That included all the XenApp stuff, the XenDesktop stuff, the Edge site, the provisioning services, the profile management. All of that were 22 consoles. Well, Citrix is now going to simplify that, at least for the Excalibur portion, which is the majority of the consoles. You know, take XenClient, you'll probably have one or two additional consoles, but XenClient right now, for the most part, is still not integrated with Excalibur. The components that have been integrated with Excalibur, we are simplifying that down to 2 consoles, folks. Those are 2 consoles that were purpose-built for XenDesktop 7, purpose-built for Excalibur. Studio is your console that you give to your administrators. That's going to give you automated workload provisioning, automatic application publishing, that custom dedicated administration. Director is a web-based console that you give to your help desk. That'll give you the ability to do end-user experience monitoring end-to-end. You have your site health and performance and real-time assessment of what's going on. So very simple. Studio is for administrators, Director is for help desk, and you can do all of the tasks that you had to do with all of these different consoles in the past from within these two consoles. Is there room for improvement? Absolutely, there's room for improvement within these consoles, but this is a huge milestone, a huge step for Citrix to consolidate those two and to purpose build them in order to accomplish this task. Now, those of you that are familiar with XenDesktop, that have been using it for a while, these two consoles are not foreign to you. Well, these are the consoles that used to be called Desktop Studio and Desktop Director. They've been renamed to simply Studio and Director, and I'm sure you can imagine why. Well, it's no longer just a desktop that we're dealing with. With the introduction of XenApp or the convergence of XenApp into this platform, well, it's no longer just desktops. It's also applications. It's also a lot of other things like the profile management and the other stuff that is going to be or is already introduced depending on the component. So it's Studio and Director. It's simple, it's easy, it's a good separation, it's a good combination of the two.